Welcome to Critical Connections. I'm Ivy Cuervo, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin Fernandes.
Hey, Evie, how you doing today?
I'm good. Super excited because today's episode takes us somewhere we've never been before. We're talking about a 2,000-kilometer tarmac rally across one of the most beautiful and remote islands in North America, a place where roads twist along cliffs over the Atlantic, where tiny outports dot the coastline, and where your phone stops working for long stretches at a time. This is Targa Newfoundland, North America's only tarmac rally, and 2026 is a marquee year. It marks 25 years since Targa was founded, over 1,000 stages run through more than 130 communities. And we have two guests who know this event better than anyone alive. Robert Giannou is the co-founder and chairman of Targa Newfoundland. He was inducted into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame in 2022 and has been organizing motorsport events in Newfoundland since the 60s. Robert, welcome.
Welcome, and thank you for the opportunity of being here.
And Corey Finkelstein, racer, promoter, and member of Targa's Board of Governors. Corey first competed in 2018, got instantly hooked, and has been both a competitor and an organizer ever since. Corey, great to have you.
Thanks, Evie. So great to be here today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Evie, I got to say, Corey, Robert, welcome. I'm super excited to understand how all this comes together here. Having been in the connectivity world and worrying about that every day, the idea of maintaining connectivity across Newfoundland at rally speeds, it's not just some marketing effort. It's a real engineering challenge. Really excited to hear how this is all done.
I can appreciate the engineering challenge. For 25 years, we've been trying to communicate throughout this event. Well, Corey, when he first joined us, had hair coming right down to his eyebrows. He's already pulled that out. And Kevin, you're admirably suited. But seriously, communication is the heart of this event, and it is seriously in need of help.
All right. So before we get into all the engineering and technical pieces of that, you've been organizing motorsport in Newfoundland since the 60s, whether it's rallies, hill climbs, even using runways as at the old U.S. Naval Station here in Argentina. Wow.
The pronunciation is Argentia, which means
silver,
okay. Yeah. And the first motorsport events in Newfoundland that had to do with racing, there was always some rallying, but the first motorsport events actually started with the American approvals because we couldn't get anyone from Newfoundland to approve it. So we went to the Americans, which had their territories, one a dual-line station, and the other was the U.S. Naval Station Argentia. So we started our first motorsport events under the American flag.
Wow. That's really cool.
Was Targa always the event you were building towards?
Amy, that's a very interesting question. I think subconsciously I would have to say yes. I didn't know such a thing existed when we started because we were still counting time in Roman numerals when I started. The real issue is I slowly, having circuit raced, drag raced, rallied, and I just thought there was something more exciting. And then in 2000, when Doug Meffam sent me a fax, that old days, in describing Targa Tasmania, I was instantly hooked on the concept of real roads, etc. It takes away the constant lapping, the constant going back and forth or turning left or right or whatever you're doing. Every second of Targa is an adventure.
Wow. And I read that Targa Newfoundland, you helped and your team obviously to reduce the incident rate from 17% down to 1.5. How did safety become such a defining part of the identity of this event?
Two reasons. One, of course, is obvious. The safety, the nature of it. We're very remote here, and the communities we run in are very remote. They're small communities. A lot of them do not have ambulance services, etc. So there's a basic necessity from a health point of view. The other one is a mathematical thought. In racing over the years, I discovered that the more you'd start out a season with perhaps 30 cars racing, and you'd have 3 races a year, which was working really great. And then someone suggested, well, let's have 5 races a year. So by the time you got around to race 5, you were down to 15 cars. We don't have the critical mass of population to keep feeding the maw of breakdowns or incidents or anything else. So for those two reasons, primarily about 90% of it was safety, of course, but then it had the second benefit of slowing things down and letting people prepare within the economic necessities of the event. When we started with Targa in the first years, we we were going hell-bent for leather to get volume and get quantity in here, and it became unmanageable from the point of view of community road closures and everything else. So we got to the point where we are now. And since COVID, I think in the 3 events that we've run since then, we have only had one incident which involved a competitor getting a bit of a scratch or something.
Wow.
So, Robert, you started this off and have been working on it for years. Corey, you came in roughly around 2018, I believe, with your first competing at Targa Bambina.
Yeah,
What was that, and how was your first impression of what Robert built?
well, it's interesting. I followed Targa for years and years, in the Toronto Star. Jim Kenzie, the Toronto Star automotive writer, would, retell the stories of his time at Targa. And I think that, it became an item on my bucket list quite early on, just from reading his articles and thinking about what it'd be like to go to Newfoundland. And then I moved into the insurance world and got a position where first thing I did was go to my boss and say, we need to do, as part of the promotion, go to Newfoundland and compete in Targa Newfoundland. And so that was 2018. I really had never been in a race car before. I never competed. I grew up on the streets, not street racing, but just driving spirited on the street. And so I figured I better get some experience. So I went to the oval racetrack in Ontario called Jurkasa and jumped in a stock car. And it was the first time I had the straps, for the harness on me and the helmet and everything and the race gloves. And I got out there, I was, scared beyond belief because it's noisy and the car has no interior and there's no dashboard. You just got a steering column and a steering wheel in front of you and pointing the car around the oval. And I did my 10 laps and I was hooked. And I thought also I'm ready to go to Newfoundland and compete. And it was an absolute blast. I had a great time. Fortunately, when 2019 came around, there wasn't an opportunity for me to come back. I couldn't make a business case for it and didn't have the time in my schedule. Then COVID happened and I saw that the event was stalled because of COVID. And I still, in the back of my mind, wanted to come back to Newfoundland. So I thought, here's an opportunity to help rekindle the event. So I reached out to Robert and basically begged him to become part of the committee, the organizing committee, and help with marketing and promotion. And here we are today, back into the swing of things. So it's been going really well. And I've competed twice since then.
Very cool. All right. So I think this is where our two worlds collide here. And we talked about communication. So Targa runs through some of the most stunning scenery in North America, but I would imagine, and from what we understand, very connectivity challenged areas. Robert, talk us through some of the communication or what communication looks like during Targa over the years. What's kind of worked and what hasn't? I'd love to understand kind of the setup of this.
It started out by mirroring Targa Tasmania, who was our grandparent, if we wish. And we bought the rights to the event from them and set it up here. We decided we would go with a fixed command center, which is what Aussie does. And then we would have the various parts of the event connected by radio, VHF, whatever. That ended up in a complete and utter disaster because VHF, as you know, mostly is line of sight, especially as you get up into the higher frequencies. And we were just losing. And I can remember the first event, the command center was established, actually one in what is now the police station in St. John's. And he basically went home on day 2. He could get no communication with anybody other than a phone call saying we're starting. And that was it. So after that, we went to experiment with the Canadian Army, believe it or not, who helped us out a lot in where they were. But we have, say, upwards to 40 stages in an event, 25 or 30 different communities. They had one signal boosting vehicle. So wherever they were, it worked. And wherever they weren't, it didn't work, which also was a washout. So then we started negotiating with the private suppliers of VHF equipment. And we would have on the road something like 45 units and with various channels and everything else. But the biggest problem we had was conductivity. When we needed the signal, for example, if you were in a community called Lower Lance Cove, which is basically on a wharf 400 feet down at sea level, when the command center is somewhere else in a vehicle, there's no signal. You can forget it. The community populations are so small, nobody's put cell towers in there. The boosters that you can buy, which are good in certain communities where there's very flat terrain, the community will put up a booster on an antenna and everyone can kind of use that. But then the bandwidth is so small, you just block
Yeah.
it out. The big problem then manifested itself over COVID, where people couldn't travel. People were stuck in the communities they were in and asked to stay there. And there was just no ability to communicate with these ambulance services as soon as the ambulance was on the road. So the government literally purchased all the ambulance companies and
Wow.
put them under one block. And last year or 2 years ago, when we started up with COVID, they were still busy trying to get them organized, but it still didn't solve the communications problem.
Hmm.
Once an ambulance a patient got in an ambulance in the community and it started rolling, it was pretty
Yeah.
much you're out of luck.
Wow.
Once they got one near St. John's, they could pick up VHF signal and they'd be away to races. So the province then invested a large amount of money in trying to do a conductivity thing, which we managed to access with the help of the province last year for the first time.
Hmm.
And it was, let's just say, much better. For example, we did the testing on conductivity in just about every little hole of a community we could find and on every wharf. And it worked perfectly. But it worked absolutely perfectly up until something happened when they didn't have the bandwidth to handle, because all of a sudden, instead of myself talking to Evie, all of a sudden Corey wanted to talk to Evie, Kevin wanted to talk to Corey, and it just blocked out. And a couple of days, it blocked out totally.
Wow.
And of course, we repeated it back, but their response, of course, is, but we don't have those kind of conversations. We have an ambulance traveling in, we'll do this and so on. The RCMP, by the way, used the same thing. But again, mostly it's from A to B, and you don't get C, D, and F jumping in. So we're still
Right.
mastering that when you guys came in. So that's why
Yeah.
we're so delighted to be here. Long answer.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think you just mentioned really an island-wide, province-wide problem, right? So this is
Correct.
real,
Oh, yes.
documented. Corey, as both a competitor and an organizer, you experienced these gaps firsthand. Robert just told us such a eye-opening story. What does it feel then when you lose connectivity mid-rally?
Well, it's interesting. So from a perspective of a competitor, I'll think back to my 2018 experience. And so back then, there was a few more time, speed, distance rally competitors. And when you're doing time, speed, distance, you have what's called an ITC or interim time check. And so there's different spots along the stage where there's somebody checking time. And when in 2018, I can remember a couple stages being canceled because of the spread of that stage. They had no communication with those ITC stations. And so therefore there wasn't, it was felt that maybe it wasn't safe or they just couldn't run the stage properly because you could maybe hear the start and the end, but you couldn't communicate with the people in the middle because of the geography. So from a competitor standpoint, it's disappointing when stages get canceled. And certainly, when not everyone can talk to each other, that's organizing the event, becomes a real safety issue, right? And being on the flip side, being on an organizer now, it's even more paramount and noticeable for us because, again, we're trying to deliver a world-class experience. And if you have to cancel a stage because of communication or connectivity problems, then it becomes a real challenge. It's disappointing for the competitors, but it's also a real safety issue for us as organizers, something that we don't want to lead into too much, right? So because safety is paramount and connectivity is the most important part of that, it's really an issue. And this year we hope that's going to be completely sorted out with your support.
I would add to what Corey's saying there. He mentions this word ITC. It means interim time control. For example, if we have a stage, which we do have on the Cape Shore of Newfoundland, someone can go get their atlas for that one. It's 42 kilometers long. We insist on having an interim time control at between every 8 and 10 kilometers on that route. And this is what Corey's talking about. So while you have 40 kilometers, you have maybe 3 or 4 different contact points. And the reason for that is when the cars are racing, each contact point records the cars as they pass them. So if there is an incident, a car disappears, we can chase it down and follow out, okay, the problem is between ITC 3 and 4. And
Right.
we can locate it and bingo. So when we lose conductivity there, it becomes highly concerning and we just won't run the stage.
It's interesting because I know that this event happens during, 2-week period where essentially the island is shut down. So It's not just about, there's a lot going on here.
No, the island does not shut down. We run a fluid shutdown. For example, we run 8 stages a day. Each stage takes approximately an hour and a half to run. That's the time we book. So if your stage is scheduled for 9, we're gone by 10:30. Your roads are open and normal, and the next community is shut down, and so on, so on, so forth.
How did you manage that, by the way, Robert? I like the way that you put it. Organized shutdown.
How did we manage that?
Robert, that's organized chaos is what it is.
Yeah, and it has a lot to do with the local liquor store.
Makes
It
sense.
is daunting to look at, but with the teams we have put together over the 25 years, and we still have the core people that started with us. It's beginning to be a little tiny bit like a geriatric ward here with, I guess, me leading the parade. But the amount of experience we have, but now that's turned into its own trap because we start hearing that's not the way we used to do it.
Yeah.
When we ran into a classic case of this week, when we were talking about timing the cars, which has a lot to do with conductivity, believe it or not. Because if you can't get the signals there to get the transmission through, we can't get the results for the cars.
So this year, for the 25th anniversary, Dejero is stepping in as an official connectivity partner. Kevin, explain what that actually means in practical terms. What's happened?
Dejero's developed this platform that really centers around our technology that we call smart blending technology. And really what that does, it takes all the available networks in the area, aggregates them together with the goal of ensuring that connectivity stays up and you've got the maximum level of bandwidth wherever we are. The goal is to use this not only from a safety perspective, but also for live content production and real-time data uploading and downloading, as Robert said, to make sure every stage is safe and properly thought through. Even trying to break through those dead zones that I'd imagine we're going to come across as we drive these routes.
One of the things which will be a fun thing to do, Kevin, is when you can get an initial setup down to us, when we can finally see over the snowbanks here, it will be interesting to go around and do the tests in all the communities.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Robert. So we've got our drive kits that our teams have put together. And yeah, as you guys are going through part of the prep and understanding what we have to bring to the party to make sure that every stage is lit up is understanding what's out there. So you'll be driving around, or the team will be driving around with our little kit to log all the RSSIs and the good throughput we're able to get over the multiple networks to kind of give us that heads up.
The RSSI.
It's the signal strength of cellular. So that's the really interesting part about our technology. I'm really curious to see as you go through this, when people say they don't have cellular coverage in areas that it looks dead, might not be the case when we start aggregating multiple connections together. So this is the strength of our technology. And I'm really, really excited to see how it performs in April as we drive around, because I think you'll be surprised.
Kevin, this could be a real barn burner for these communities. I'm talking about when Targa isn't there. Because if they are able to access through however you ladies and gentlemen market your goods, the community of Lance Cove or the community of Petley, which you cannot get cheap out of a cell phone and in their place. Like the real question is someone asked is, what do these people do when somebody has a heart attack and the phones are out?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that leaves a very big pregnant pause in the conversation. And they might only be a couple of miles from a access to an ambulance or something. And this has become a real critical thing. And more so because now we find a lot of people are getting, let's just say, they're done with the golden horseshoe type living and are coming to Newfoundland and moving into these communities and buying old homes and restoring them either as cottages or permanent living devices. We have friends in Random Island. If it isn't for a solid phone line, a fixed phone line, they don't get out on fall.
Yeah. So what does it mean then to have reliable connectivity at the race, but also on the island?
That's correct. And more so on the Labrador coast, which I can only just think of right now.
Yeah. And again, from our perspective, there are so many different options to, the words we use is light up an area, whether it's the race or a permanent area where there's populations there. There's so many different options, and it's getting more cost effective as we go through it. And in my mind, I think Starlink, I think Kuiper, I think OneWeb, all the different LEO constellations that are out there that we can do this with. We have a lot of trusted partners, Eutelsat, OneWeb being one of them, or one of our major ones. I'd love to, again, get our hands in there, make sure that understand what we're dealing with, and then propose a technical solution as the race approaches.
My advice is start early.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree. I think preparation is key. Just like racing in the event, preparing for it and making sure everything is
Exactly.
good beforehand is going to be the key here.
Robert, Corey, for people who obviously are into car racing, I'm sure that Targa Newfoundland is a name that they're aware of, but what happens then when you've got connectivity and all of a sudden now you can tell your story to a broader audience in real time? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. So with Targa, the biggest challenge obviously is you want to share with your team what's happening and with your audience, your social circles. And
Mhm.
if you have no connectivity, you can't get the message out, and you have to wait until the end of the day when you're back at the hotel or within cell range. And so for us,
Mhm.
it's a challenge as organizers because we want to be presenting Targa in real time during the event so that people can follow along. And same with the competitors who want to share to their, show their sponsors the value of what they're doing and getting the messaging out. So being able to have that connectivity is crucial. For the last couple of years, my navigator and I would, haul around a Starlink RV setup in the trunk of our race car and then
Mhm.
set it up, at stops. But the problem is we're not always the first one to get in, and we might
Mhm.
be the first, like a sooner to leave than we've gotten in. So it's, we're trying to race, we're trying to set up this system to have temporary connectivity. People are busy having lunch, and not everyone's standing close enough to the dish. So having a reliable system where there's a central point or just connectivity all around that everyone can connect with is going to be incredible. It's going to help to promote the event again in real time and just to build a wider audience and create more sponsors.
I want to just kind of take a moment because I know we've talked about this, but I think it's worth kind of digging deeper. Kevin, the connectivity gaps Robert was mentioning, that Corey were mentioning across Newfoundland are the same gaps that first responders, RCMP, emergency managers, military deal with every day in that, in that part of Canada. Talk about then sort of the connection between connectivity, between what's happening in every day.
Yeah, I think the average person in the average city kind of looks around and says, why is connectivity a problem? I can get on my laptop and my phone works. And the reality is, when you zoom out, even within Canada, even within Ontario, let alone the Newfoundland and Labrador area, there are some serious connectivity gaps for the average person. That multiplies exponentially when we talk about some of the things Robert and Corey have been talking about, whether it's a planned event where people are expecting a certain level of service, but more importantly, when people rely on it for their medical or critical needs as just being part of the community. So really, when we start looking at it that way, connectivity, we always say it's that first and last mile of connection that becomes the big problem. What our job day in and day out is to understand how we can close that gap and make sure that at the very least people feel that they're connected for safety reasons. And
Mhm.
then, on the good days, and what we strive for is to make sure that there's more than that connectivity to stream multiple videos out of cars, ensure that events are taken care of, and everyone is moving along with the business they want to do without worrying about staying connected.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Robert and Corey, I mean, if you could share your insights, I know that, as part of the event, you worked with government agencies from the beginning. So you've seen the communities rally around this event. What would better connectivity, or actually, what would connectivity, period, since it's been a challenge, actually mean?
Our desire is to put command center in a fixed location. For example, it could be in St. John's for the first 2 days. It could be in Clarendon for the next 2 days, and Gander for the last 2 days, whatever it is. If we could do that, then we have people in a calm, collected surrounding making decisions as a result of what's going on the course. Because right now we have too many parts moving. We have the competitors moving. We have all our stage volunteers, of which there are 50 or 60 or almost 70 on the road with us, making sure the event happens. They're another moving part, 70 of them. And then there's the 30 odd, 40 odd competitors moving. And then command centers moving with them. So each one, if you look at the permutations and combinations of it, it's impossible for it not to butter up.
Yeah. And Evie, what I'd kind of highlight here is like what Robert's explaining is exactly what our federal agencies and our customers, whether it's within the federal space or defense, experience every day. What you're describing is a portable command station that moves around to ensure that the surrounding areas are taken care of and you guys can communicate. That applies to the FIFA World Cup that we're working with local law enforcement as they're setting up networks that need to be stood up and tear down within a month. It has to do with large news events that we cover, whether it's the elections or anything around Canada, that we need that connectivity to follow those candidates and making sure everyone's safe. We helped a lot of agencies out at the G7 and Kanaskas, and we talk about hard, challenging connectivity, same thing. How do you pop it up, make sure it works, and then pull it back down? And the one thing I'd kind of stress, and where we, at least certainly I think about every day to make sure that our products are working correctly, is Robert and Corey aren't IT managers. They're racers and event promoters that are putting on a heck of a show. So when we bring a solution or anyone brings a solution to them, it's about pressing the button, turning it on, and having it work so they can do their job. Just like the officers, the broadcasters.
And we're only the first tier of this.
Exactly.
We're the generals, if you were, but when you get down to the colonels, the sergeants, the corporals, and the privates, it gets really snaky.
Right. So you ask, where the proof point is and why a Targa event is so symbolic to everything else we do. Well, they have the same problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to the human element. Robert, you wrote something that really stuck with me. You said that Targa challenges us out of our day-to-day environment and into the world of our wildest dreams that manifest themselves into wonderful memories. You and I have talked about Targa and what it means to you. After 25 years of doing this, what keeps you coming back? What keeps you pushing the envelope to make this event even greater and better?
That very sentence, that's what keeps me here. The fellow says we're not here for the long time, we're here for the fun time. Well, it's just the continuous challenge that it brings from the people aspect of it, which is huge, from the people you meet here in the event, such as Corey. I mean, I remember when Corey first came here, he was literally jumping up and down inside the car. And Kevin, just so we get this on record, I cannot wait to see when Evie gets here, because it'd be very difficult keeping her in her skin. Because she gets excited about things right now, except to see little pieces of Evie running around like a squirrel.
Oh, yeah. You're not ready for me. You're not ready for me, Robert.
What's that?
You're not ready for me, Robert.
You'll be surprised.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'll just add that it's a life-changing experience. We joke when we're the first couple days, which is in class at Targa, and everybody's a stranger. And we say, you might be all kind of nervous and strangers and not knowing what to say to each other quite just yet. But when you go home, you're going to have a lifetime group of new friends. You're going to keep in touch forever because of this bonding experience. And for me, I mean, this T-shirt I'm wearing, it says I was faster than Randy Pops. And he's a professional race car driver. And there was one day where I was faster than him. And he probably wasn't too happy about that, but that was the life-changing moment for me, being a non-professional, race car driver. One day only. I mean, he was much faster after that, but that one day was my shining moment.
What Corey doesn't mention is it took Tom, his co-driver, about 2 hours to cool Corey down after, stop the shaking and everything.
Well, we made shirts because it was such an exciting moment for both of us. Tom, kudos to Tom for the navigational skills and for me keeping the car on the road. I mean, honestly, as a driver, all you're doing is the gas, the brake, and the steering wheel. And the passenger who's in the navigator who's in the passenger seat, he's the one, or she is the one that's driving the car from that side seat, telling you exactly what to do. And every decision that I make as a driver is based on what I'm being told. It's, I'm looking to make sure, but it's that confidence that the navigator is telling you exactly what to do, and there's that trust that gets built up over the week, gets stronger and stronger, and then you become almost like one. It's symbiotic, and you can conquer anything together. It's
amazing.
We have seen some really remarkable in-car footage of what we would call the maturing of relationships during the event. We always caution everybody to be very careful. And the other thing about Targa, I'm just digressing for a second. The other thing about Targa that is so important that anyone who goes racing in a car, be it circle track, hill climbs, whatever, do not have someone to share the experience with. What Corey's describing is he has shared that with Tom Corney. They create the shirts, they create this. And so it's not like something you have in your head where you're alone and you're trying to tell people after the wonderful experience you had, and they're just looking at with the blank stare, looking at their watch saying, is this over now? Now you've got two people who can trade back and forth and share, and two people who've had to live together in what I would call is a variable stress regime, because the secret of Targa is every day it gets more difficult. It's like a high jump.
Mhm.
And so by day 5, it's really interesting because you have a number of things working. You have number one, your knowledge of each other, the driving of the car, that's all increasing. Then you have on the other side of the graph, your fatigue level is coming down and your energy level is coming down. So it makes for a remarkable psychological study.
Well, yeah, and listening to both of you guys talk about it, it's clear it just goes beyond motorsport and technology. So
By far, by far. The
if we can get the
motorsports that we can be
technology out of the way, we're good.
Absolutely.
Incredible. Well, as we're wrapping up now, Robert, for anyone listening who's thinking about competing or volunteering or just coming out to watch, what should they know about Targa 2026?
be prepared for an out of body experience. Seriously, it's much, much more a head experience than it is a body experience. We have people who volunteered for 25 years here.
Wow.
It's absolutely incredible. So that's the biggest thing you take out. Yes, you do have fun.
Mhm.
Yes, you do have stress. Yes, you do have achievement. We did studies a number of years ago from Maslow and Hertzberg and these kind of psychiatrists. And what it turned out is number one goal of most of the competitors or thing they took away from it was I survived and finished it. That was the big thing. From the motivator's point of view, it was a sense of self-achievement that I had done it. Those were the two comfortablest takeaways from it. So that's not an easy question to answer, but that's as close as we'll ever get it.
That's great. Corey, one thing that you tell a first timer.
Don't over prepare. So a lot of people come with too highly prepared of a car, too much technology, too many modifications. And, I think, it depends on what your goal is, of course, but Tom and I proved that we could take my regular automobile without any prep and race Targa and finish, 6th overall in the competition and 2nd in our class. And the reason we did that was because we had a car that just worked. We didn't overbuild it. And there's certainly some competitive advantages to certain things that you can do to your car. But I think what some people come away with disappointed after coming to Targa is that they've overbuilt their car and it breaks after a couple of days and they don't have spare parts because we're on an island that doesn't have everything. You can't just go to the auto parts store and pick up what you need, right? So the locals will help you as much as they possibly can. But, if you brought a Lamborghini and there isn't any parts on the island because there's no other Lamborghinis, which there sometimes aren't, you're out of luck, right? So don't come over prepared. That's my best advice.
That's really good advice. Kevin, you're also a big car enthusiast. Any last words?
Well, I can't speak for racing Targa just yet, but I will say from a Dejero perspective, Evie, you know this, we've gone down this path of we're not telling anyone what we do anymore. We're showing it. And this is a great event to show people what we can do and help out a great organization.
Well, Robert, Corey, thank you so much for joining us. Targa 2026 runs from September 10 to 18 on the island of Newfoundland. Applications are open now at targanfld.com. Thanks for listening to Critical Connections. Stay safe, stay connected. Until next time.